Alright, so here I have my CNG HDR15 radio on WLNK 100.9 Indian Trail, North Carolina, and also WBT-HD2, which is fed through WLNK. And my Eton Traveler 3 radio on WMXG 99.3 in Chester, South Carolina. And for what has these two stations be simulcasts and how they are now, well, for now, of course. So these two stations are operated by Urban One. And 5 months ago, or December of 2025, Urban One would make changes to, here in Charlotte, their lineup of radio stations. And specifically for what they did to WLNK and WMXG, aside from any other changes they did to the other stations. WLNK would move from their former frequency of 107.9, which is currently WBT, to 100.9, which used to be where WPZS-FM used to be on, until they move over to the AM where they're currently on. And WMXG 99.3 used to be WBT-FM until WBT-FM will move over to 107.9. And that's the 99.3 station in Chester, South Carolina, would end up being a simulcast station to WLNK. So with that noted, that means that both of these stations essentially broadcast the same thing to two areas of around the Charlotte market area. Now, on this night of Sunday, May 31st of 2026, that is going to change. Because this day here is going to be the final broadcasting day of the mixed format on WLNK and WMXG. And so what is going to happen tonight, or by midnight or 12 a.m., is that WLNK and WMXG are going to be switching from what they're both on now to having Christian radio formats owned by different broadcasters. So instead of being two simulcast stations owned by one broadcaster, they'll instead have a likely similar radio format but owned by different broadcasters. And so WLNK, by the time that it moves to Christian radio, will be from broadcaster Bible Broadcasting Network, or BBN. And WMXG will have its Christian radio formats to Augusta Radio Fellowship. And in addition to that, by the time that WLNK does become BBN, that they'll also have their call sign flipped from WLNK to WYFQ FM. So, with all of that being said, I'm sure I've said enough already. I'm going to be filming one video on one of my two iPhones here, on either WLNK 100.9 or WBT-HD2, which, as I said, is fed through WLNK, and my Eton Traveler 3 radio on WMXG. So one of my two phones is going to be on one of the stations. So right now, it is currently, give me time here, 11:29 p.m. So 31 minutes left on the clock. So I'll find an appropriate time for me to film these two stations. And by the time that I do film these two stations, well, you'll be seeing what happens. I guess we somehow have what will probably be the final weekly test broadcasted by WLNK, as they're just at their last 29 minutes here. So still on the clock here. But what a surprise somehow.
WLNK Indy Trail, WMXG Chester, WBT-HD2.
Charlotte's best mix, 100.9 and 99.3.
Always streaming on the free Mix Charlotte app.
Alright, well, we got 5 seconds of summer playing. Now we got these last few seconds here for the switch. So, here we go with WLNK. Well, WLNK's off the air somehow, given the low bar signal. I'll make a quick switch over to WBT-HD2. That's silent. And that's off the air. So as you can see, it is 12:01 right now. It is officially 12:01 right now of June 1st. So D-Day, that is happened, to WLNK Indian Trail, which will now become WFYQ Weddington, North Carolina, and WMXG 99.3 in Chester, South Carolina. Alright, so here we now have WMXG 99.3 Chester, South Carolina on Augusta Radio Fellowship's Christian radio format. So as you can see, they have switched. It is 12:17 now. WLNK, on the other hand, still off the air as of now. So while WMXG has already switched by now, as you heard, WLNK, on the other hand, still going about their way. I'll listen in on WLNK, or I guess what will become WYFQ, for the next couple of minutes, or however long it is, until they actually have their format on. So I'll do another video then if that's the case soon. Alright, so it is 1:20 a.m. right now, and not long after I got back up here after having my Eton Travelers 3 radio, which you saw with the WMXG transition downstairs at my garage. So here I am back in my bedroom again. And WBT-HD2, which I had said as sharing the same feed as WLNK, is now broadcasting their own thing. And this is while WLNK, which I probably shouldn't even be calling WLNK since it will become WYFQ, still off the air. Now, here's the thing here. So WBT-HD2 is actually broadcasting a format that's to Urban 1, which they are operated by. This format they already use for the other stations. Because if I were to go over to WOSF-HD2, which is operated by Urban 1, can't afford to go against copyright here. Yeah, broadcasting the same thing. And if I were to tune on to 102.5 FM, broadcasting the same thing. And this 102.5 station is the analog simulcast to WOSF HD2, and I suppose just now WBT-HD2. And I say HD2 as in HD radio. So I guess since WLNK turned WYFQ 100.9 has officially parted ways with Urban 1, that I suppose WBT-HD2, which used to share the same feed with WLNK, will be broadcasting this instead. And WLNK, or what will become WYFQ, to become BBN, or Bible Broadcasting Network. Which 1 hour passed when they first went off the air. They're still off the air now. And WMXG is still broadcasting on their new formats from Augusta Radio Fellowship. So, if I'll be listening to 100.9 for a while to hear any changes. And that if I do hear any changes, then I'll add another portion of this video. But until then, we'll be hearing this. Alright, so it is 11:54 p.m. right now on Monday, June 1st. So we're coming up near the 24 hours that it's been since the transitioning process of WLNK, or the soon to be WYFQ, WBT-HD2, and WMXG. WMXG, which I have right here. And as you can hear them, they're broadcasting the Good News Network format that they transitioned to since earlier today, which I've been saying that it is operated by the Augusta Radio Fellowship, but I'm actually just now recently knowing that the format in particular is Good News Network. So that's what they've been on since earlier today. Now, as far as programming data for what you'd see on the screen, and I am getting this station a consistent signal, by the way. So WMXG as well as WLNK used to display on screen something like mix 100.9, 99.3, but ever since WMXG switched from their former mix format to what we're on now, that they took that out, and that's all empty now, for now at least, unless if maybe programming data is maybe added in the future, but that's WMXG broadcasting. Now, as for WLNK, still off the air. And as for WBT-HD2, they're still on the praise format, which, just so you know, is also broadcasted on this, as well as this, and also this. So this here is WPZS-AM 610. So this is the source for your praise gospel formats being broadcast. And they originally would broadcast on two feeds, that being WOSF and 102.5 W273DA FM and simulcast. But ever since WBT-HD2 transitioned, it's now gone to WPZS-AM having 3 FM feeds. So that including WBT-HD2. And for the 4 stations all coming from Urban 1, and WLNK, which I said as simulcasting with WBT-HD2, now separated from Urban 1, that I suppose that this will be the way that WBT-HD2 will go going forward. Funny how they haven't changed that. But yeah. At this point, we have WBT-HD2 broadcasting its thing, and WMXG broadcasting its new thing, and WLNK, or the soon-to-be WYFQ, somehow BBN, or Bible Broadcasting Network, somehow hasn't called them yet. No idea why.
Your mind for a long time. Listener-supported GNN Radio.
You're listening to WILF Monroeville and WMXG Chester.
The world today is, which is why it is more important than ever that we keep a right perspective. This is not all there
we're on
is for the
Tuesday,
Christian.
June 2nd
This is not
now.
our home. So be encouraged.
Let's see what this day will
think
hold
on
up
whatever
next.
is lovely, pure, and excellent.
WOSF-HD2 Gaffney, WPZS Charlotte, W273DA Charlotte, WBT-HD2, home of Get Up Mornings with Erica Campbell from 6 to 10 a.m. Praise 102.5 and 6:10 a.m. Charlotte's Inspiration Station. Charlotte's Inspiration Station.
Well, that's now the station identification to the praise formats on WBT-HD2. And as you can see, it now displays WBT-HD2 praise and religious music for their HD signal. And I believe that this new programming data, and just so you know, this is June 3rd here, so this is the 3rd day of WBT-HD2 now on their praise formats, which is also fed on WOSF-HD2, W273DA 102.5 FM, that'd be an FM translator, and WPZS 610 AM. So basically carried through 4 stations of feeds. Now, this is the 3rd day of WBT-HD2 on this, but I believe it's just today, at least I think today, that this programming data is now actually adopted. Because even on the first day or two of WBT-HD2 away from mixing on this, they still had the mix 100.9, 99.3 on their programming data. So it looks as if they actually have this adopted. on their programming data to be shown on radio screens. Now, as an update to this, along with WLNK, still off the air. This is the third day of these three stations that used to broadcast mix, now all separate. Like WMXG has its own format, WBT-HD2 has its own format as well, albeit one by existing other stations of Urban One. And WLNK, or future WYFQ, still has nothing. So I have no idea what's taking this long for a format used by other stations in my market by BBN or Bible Broadcasting Network, because Bible Broadcasting Network already operates stations surrounding my market area, Charlotte. They even have a translator station on 93.7. So I have no idea on why for a format that my market already has, for a station to take this long, and on the third day, for no news of this station. Alright, so I didn't realize this as I was filming that, but I did look into it some time later, and I also sort of knew it before filming as well. But the move of 100.9 going from WLNK to WYFQ didn't just involve station formats, but also to deal with the transmitter tower that will supply 100.9, and I'm going to be saying 100.9 regardless of WLNK or WYFQ. And this would involve 100.9 switching their towers from their previous location near Indian Trail, North Carolina at 6,000 watts to their new tower right around the North and South Carolina border at Indian Lane, South Carolina, near Weddington, North Carolina, that 100.9 is now licensed to at 25,000 watts. So maybe that might have been for what would turn out to be a 3-day wait for 100.9 to broadcast again, though at the same time, if not that, then I can't think for any other reason why it would be 3 days for this move. But aside from that, we'll get to the next day after, for what would be the final change to take place for 100.9.
Bringing you the good news, WYFQ FM Indian Trail. How do you do? It's easy to look at a...
Yep, it's official. What used to be former WLNK 100.9 out of Indian Trail, North Carolina, is now WYFQ 100.9 in Weddington, North Carolina. And more importantly, it being a Bible Broadcasting Network affiliate station. And after the past 3 days in which 100.9 has spin off the air, they had went on the air to now broadcast this today. Now it's 11 p.m. Wait, let me pull up the time again. 11:01 p.m. right now, but I discovered this since 7 p.m. today. Now, I can't exactly say for when exactly at what time today did they go on the air to broadcast this, though I will say that I did do my morning check today to see on how 100.9 was. They were still off the air, not surprising. So they might have went on the air maybe around the afternoon, but again, I don't exactly know when they transitioned, since I wouldn't say I was listening in the afternoon. But nonetheless, for me just discovering this evening of what would be the 4th day throughout this whole transitioning process of this and 2 other stations, that 100.9 for the Charlotte, North Carolina area is now WYFQ. And as far as this whole transitioning process of this and WMXG 99.3 Chester, South Carolina, along with WBT-HD2 107.9, which with former WLNK here were these three stations that were all connected with the mix format. So at this point, we now have WBT-HD2 broadcasting the praise gospel format, which is, as I said, carried over on other stations in my area, operated by Urban One. WYFQ on BBN, or Bible Broadcasting Network, and WMXG on their Good News Network format from Augusta Radio Fellowship. So, I'm going to be having my moment of reflection for WLNK. So, for as much time as I've been knowing of WLNK when it used to exist, and keep in mind that I've only been a radio observer or an enthusiast for about 7 to 8 years, I wouldn't say I've had too much times with listening to WLNK. Nothing wrong to do with the station, just more of that me discovering more FM stations, even though I've been a radio enthusiast for 7 to 8 years, but just me getting to know more radio stations. And I've been around in my time in radio long enough to experience back when WLNK was not only on 107.9, but also when they were known as 107.9 The Link. Which makes sense when you consider why they were that, considering their call letters WLNK, with the LNK in their name being like the word link, if you care to know that. And as far as just the WLNK name itself, the station itself has had that for much longer than even my short time, well, quote unquote short time of listening to radio overall. And for what I can think of, the WLNK name has been used on the station for about 3 decades. So that's a long time for one station that has primarily had its history of various music formats to carry that one name throughout those 3 decades. That's a long time there. And I wouldn't say that I haven't had a couple of moments where I was listening to some songs for WLNK and maybe jam into them a little bit. So regardless of how little or how much I've listened to WLNK by its mix format, which I'd say throughout my time of knowing WLNK's mix format itself is as much as I know WLNK as far as my experience goes, but clearly they've had a much longer history than that. So for them to carry that one name through music format for the station for 3 decades, that's a long time for one name. And also the various hosts and music formats that revolved around the station. But beyond that, we're now at a point where WLNK and also the mixed music format itself is no more, with both WLNK and WMXG, to the point to where what used to be WLNK is now WYFQ on the Christian-oriented Bible Broadcasting Network affiliate, and WMXG on Good News Network format operated by Augusta Radio Fellowship. And also WBT-HD2, which used to carry the feed of WLNK, being on its own format, coming from Urban One themselves, which, as I said, they use on other stations. So at this point, we've gone from what used to be 3 sister stations on these frequencies throughout this transition process, parting ways. So it's not often that I do these type of videos where I'm basically filming one or more stations switching from one format to another format, especially since a majority of my content, like about 98%, is all weather radio oriented. But regardless of how much or how little I do this type of content outside of mainly weather radios, hopefully this video was enough to interest you in some way, because the fact that these three stations that, as I said, used to rely on this one format applying to my hometown area of Charlotte, North Carolina, were enough for me to film this whole video. And so this is where we're at now for the three stations, from one format to three separate ones. So, and for WLNK itself, I'll be missing WLNK just for how long I've been knowing them and for the sake of them being in my area. So yeah, that's where we're at now with WLNK now being WYFQ. And this is what we have for the station now.